Okay, good evening and welcome to the June 6th meeting of the governing body. I will call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Duncan, who will provide the invocation. Stand as you are able and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. As those up here just heard, but the rest of you didn't, I forgot I had the invocation this evening, so that's all right. We'll be fine. We can make this happen. Bow your heads. Dear Lord, we are here tonight gathered once again to do the work of the people of the city of Topeka and the surrounding areas. These days, like many others, always present us with new and great challenges. I ask you to give us the patience above all else, but particularly the strength and the ability to work through the issues before us and to best serve the citizens of the city of Topeka. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if we will call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller. Here. Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Kale.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Hofer.
Here.
All right, we have 10 present.
Okay, roll call being completed, we will move on to agenda item 2, which is a need for an executive session. If the city attorney will read, please.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 1 hour for consultation with the city attorney to discuss attorney-client privilege matters regarding a specific employment matter as justified by KSA 754319B2. The open meeting will resume in the city council chambers. In order to not displace the audience, they all get to stay. You guys get to go downstairs to the downstairs courtroom for the convenience of our citizens. It's not court, it's just a courtroom. The following staff will be requested to assist the city, or the governing body in its deliberations. City Attorney Stanley.
Before we recess into the executive session, yes, ma'am. I do have a proclamation I would like to read before we recess into the executive session while we have the recipients here and get that taken care of so that they're not waiting till later on.
Okay, we'll just remember that motion in a second when you move it.
Okay? We're going to use this small mic, I think we can hear it. Hear me. If I could read this proclamation for National Pride Month. I feel privileged to be able to do that in the city of Topeka that recognizes diversity and inclusion in everything that we try to do. So I'm going to read the proclamation, then I'm going to ask a gentleman to join me up here to take the proclamation on behalf of those who we are talking about tonight. A proclamation by the mayor. Whereas across the United States, the month of June commemorates the June 1969 uprising of members of the LGBTQ1A+ community against harassment targeted against them because of their gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression. And whereas the LGBTQIA+ continue to strengthen the fabric of American society, there are many well-respected LGBTQIA+ leaders in all professional fields, including the arts, government, business, and the business communities. The determination and dedication of the LGBTQ1A+ rights movement, more LGBTQIA+ Americans are living their lives openly today than ever before. And whereas all people are born and created equal in human dignity and civil rights, and LGBTQIA+ individuals have made a great progress in being recognized in their equal human dignity and civil rights, but there is further progress to be made. And whereas the City of Topeka Municipal Code declares that people shall be free from discrimination because of their actual or perceived age, color, disability, familial status, gender identity, genetic information, national origin or ancestry, race, religion, sex, and sexual orientation, or veteran status, and whereas recognizing Pride Month furthers awareness of the LGBTQIA+ community in Topeka and beyond our community, and is an opportunity to engage more with LGBTQIA+ people and their history. And whereas the rainbow flag represents light, healing, sun, calmness, art, and spirit, as long as the promise of equality for all remains unfulfilled, all Americans are affected. If we can work together to advance the principles upon which our nation was founded, every American will benefit. Now, therefore, I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the City of Topeka, Kansas, do hereby proclaim June 2023 as National Pride Month. In witness thereof, I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the City of Topeka, Kansas, do hereby affix my official signature and the official seal of the City of Topeka, Kansas on this day of June 6, 2023. And if I may have Mr. Will Nager join me and anyone else you would like to bring. I'll get out of your way. So, having read the proclamation, I want to acknowledge your presence here. Thank you for being here. And if any of you would like to make a comment, you're welcome to do so.
I believe that Caleb has a
I'm gonna try and get this here. Okay. I am Caleb Soliday. I'm the president of Topeka Pride. I want to first thank Will Nager for helping set this up for us. I also want to thank you, the city of Topeka. It's no sort of shock to hear that back in the day, Topeka was not a very welcoming place, especially with certain groups that are against our community. That I think this is a major step forward, and we hope to continue this partnership with Topeka, and we hope for future proclamations and hope for future support as well. And thank you. Thank you.
Madam City Attorney, do you need to restate or need?
I think the full motion's in the minutes, not to exceed 1 hour. Everyone can stay here. You guys will go downstairs.
Okay. Second. Have a motion to approve by Councilwoman Ortiz, second by Councilman Emerson. All those in favor, well, we're using the box this time.
We do have boxes this time.
Okay. You tell me when we're ready, Brenda.
Okay. All right. You should be able to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion is carried. We will adjourn into executive session at the lower level.
Correct.
Thank you very much. The time noted is ready. Okay, we've come out of executive session. No decisions have been made, and the action has been taken during that executive session. So we will now return to the agenda, and next up we have appointments. If the clerk will read.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Marisol Marcello to the Topeka Human Relations Commission to fill an expired term ending June 6, 2025.
Okay, you've heard the appointment read. Is there a motion? Motion to approve by Councilman Kell, second by Councilwoman Nager. And tell us when we're ready to vote, Brenda.
Okay, you can vote.
You got to use the box now.
Okay, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. I saw I saw the young lady in the audience earlier. There she is. Marisol, would you stand, please? I want to thank you. Thank you for stepping forward in service. We'll move on now to the consent agenda. Brenda, if you'll read.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the 99.3 Eagle Cruising the Capitol Car Show 2023. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Randy Wheat an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions. C is approval of a human resources contract between the City of Topeka and Clear Company Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $24,065.75 for implementing an additional software platform for advanced onboarding. D is approval of a Public Works engineering contract between the City of Topeka and BG Consultants, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $87,500 for engineering services. E are minutes of the regular meeting of May 16, 2023, and there's a list of cereal malt beverage license renewal applications. Staff is recommending approval.
Okay, you've heard the consent agenda is read. Is it motion to approve by Councilwoman Nager, second by Deputy Mayor Dobler? When you're ready to vote, Brenda?
All right, go ahead.
That's too much paper.
All right, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion's carried. Move on now to agenda item 6, action items, if the clerk will read.
A is a public hearing on the advisability of establishing a community improvement district at the corner of Southwest 32nd Terrace and Southwest Topeka Boulevard and levying a 2% CID sales tax within the CID.
Okay. For this item, I'm looking here, I want to make sure we have everything in place. We do have an opportunity for public hearing on this item 6A. So at this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to the matter.
Mr. Mayor, I do think before you open the public hearing, Interim Director Rhiannon Friedman would like to give a presentation on the item.
Okay, thank you. I didn't have it on my,
Before we start, can I get a point of clarification, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, but I want to clarify? Today is the hearing. We do not vote on this evening. That vote takes place next week, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all there. Thanks.
okay, Rhiannon?
Yes, thank you. All right, so I'll be giving a quick presentation to do a brief overview of the Southwest 32nd Terrace, Southwest Topeka Boulevard project plan. So the development agreement that's included in your packet, I just wanted to make sure that I could hit some of the highlights. The developer 911 Walnut has proposed the redevelopment of approximately 5.05 acres at the southwest corner of Southwest 32nd Terrace and Southwest Topeka Boulevard. The developer anticipates this will include 2 new standalone restaurant buildings and a multi-tenant strip retail building collectively comprising of approximately 20,000 square foot of newly constructed commercial space. So here's an image of the proposed site plan. So as you can see, the site plan helps outline the 2 pad restaurants that are going to be on the frontage of Topeka Boulevard, and then the strip retail development that's located in the southwest portion of the site as well. So it's worth noting that this project will also include associated infrastructure updates, including but not limited to surface parking, landscaping, signage, lighting, utilities, stormwater improvements, sidewalks, streets, and other associated improvements that will come along with the project. So I thought this graphic would be a nice reminder. The South Topeka TIF district, or redevelopment district rather, was established October 11th of 2022. So you'll see here the TIF district is outlined in the red that creates the boundary, and then the project-specific area boundary is outlined in blue for this specific project that will be taking place. So digging a little deeper into the investment, the project is approximately a $15.1 million investment into the area, and the CID request is a 2% with a commencement date of January 1st, 2025. There is a maximum reimbursable amount that's set in the development agreement, and that's set at $3,205,000. There are also some language around placed in service dates that are set to be not later than June 30th of 2025 for the pad restaurant sites that are the frontage of Topeka Boulevard, and then December 31st, 2026 for the multi-tenant strip retail building. And then lastly, just to give you an overview of the process to date, we talked about the redevelopment district being established in October of 2022, and then April of this year as well. This actually went in front of the Planning Commission, and a resolution was approved finding the consistency with the Land Use Growth Management 2040 Plan. So Planning Commission supporting this use for that area. Public hearing taking place tonight, and then we'll be presenting an ordinance on the governing body agenda for action next Tuesday at the 13th meeting.
Any questions for Yanni? Councilman Duncan?
So on the 2% on the CID, it's up to that 3 million plus number, correct? Then it would stop. Does it also have a date it ends on it, or is it just, is it like 10 years or $3 million, you know, like the car warranty, or?
Yes, there is a date on it. Jeff White is in the audience who can, 22 years. I couldn't remember if it's 21 or 22, but maximum is 22 years, but it does end once they've hit that maximum amount.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilwoman Hiller and then Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple. Both our TIF and SID policies, I believe, have a but-for phrasing in them. Could you briefly review how that number was arrived at and whatever documentation is needed?
Yes, I can, but I should probably.
Could we defer to Jeff White to come up and talk about that? He did the but-for test for us. He wasn't expecting this, so congrats on coming to a meeting.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jeff White with Columbia Capital. We serve as the city's financial advisor. And with your indulgence here, I will get the document in front of me. So conceptually, the way that we calculate the but-for is consistent with the approach that's used throughout the region. We look at what the expected developer rate of return would be for the project, taking into account the construction costs, the acquisition costs, and the operation of the facility over a period of 10 years. And then we assume a hypothetical sale at the end of 10 years. The sale price is determined using what's called a capitalization rate. Capitalization rate is commonly used in commercial real estate. It actually can be measured in the wild. We take a look at actual sales of different kinds of properties, multifamily apartment complexes, office complexes, those kinds of things. We compare the net operating income, which is the operating expense or operating revenues minus the operating expenses in a given year. And we compare that to what the sale price was. So we take the NOI, we divide it into the sale price, and that gives us what's called a capitalization rate. That tells us what the market rate of return should be for that particular class of project. And there are commercial real estate companies around the country that will measure this typically on a regional basis, although some will do it for a particular city or whatever the case is. Johnson County does it. They commission a report and they do it themselves. So Johnson County Assessor's Office produces a report that shows different capitalization rates for, I don't know, 20 or 25 different classes of property. So we were able to find a number of commercial real estate surveys that identified for this region what a cap rate would be on this type of retail, which is restaurant use for the most part, although the third building, as Rhiannon mentioned, is unclear, but it's just sort of general commercial at this point until there's tenants identified. So we use that cap rate to determine the hypothetical sale price at the end of 10 years, sort of getting back to where I started. We then look at the cash flows each year and we calculate what the developer's rate of return would be without incentives. In this particular case, we found that that rate of return was actually negative, that the cost to acquire this project, to demo the buildings that are there, to put in the infrastructure, and to build these new buildings was such that there would not be a market rate of return established. So at that point, we say that but for the presence of the incentives, there would not be a project. And I think you can also look sort of at what's happened along that corridor for the last 25 or 30 years and come to a reasonable conclusion that that conclusion's probably not far from the truth. So then the next question is, or should be, I think, is how much incentive is too much incentive, right? And so we've established the but for. We know that the developer's not likely to generate a market rate of return without incentives. So ideally, we provide them just enough incentive, like to the dollar, to get them a market rate of return without exceeding that. Now, the challenge is that that's impossible, right? There's always an asymmetry when it comes to these kinds of negotiations. They certainly have information that we don't. We're using regional data to look at what a rate of return is. It's 6 months or 12 months old, which in this case actually probably helps us because cap rates are going the higher. They're going in a more conservative direction with interest rates rising, which makes the but-for test look even worse, right? They're further away from meeting that market rate of return. But we then put these incentives into that same mathematical calculation, and we identify what the value of the developer's rate of return with those incentives would be, including that. And what we actually showed here, and you'll find that in our analysis in your packet, is our projected rate of return is close to, but not actually at, the market rate of return. Why would they do the project anyways? I think that they would tell you they're going to do the project anyways because they have a very good lead on the two tenants that will front on Topeka Boulevard. And so they've got some certainty as part of the project. If they were building this on spec, my sense is they would probably not be okay with the $3.2 million cap in the amount of incentive that would be collected. But it turns out that that cap provides the city some assurance that they're not just going to be able to generate proceeds of the CID ad infinitum without any limit. We're giving them just enough incentive, we hope, to cause them to do the project, but not so much that it's sort of an unfair tax on folks that will be using that project in the case of the CID. And then we're talking about TIF as well. We've got to be, as a city, we've got to be stewards of other taxing jurisdictions' tax dollars because we've got the right to cause them to be captured to fund this economic development project. Once the district is created, their ability to do anything but show up at a public hearing and complain about it is gone. So that but-for is important from a policy perspective. It's important for you all as policymakers to be able to look your colleagues at the school district and the other taxing entities in the eye and say we did our best to generate economic development, but not do so at an extraordinary cost to the community.
Thank you for that. If I could ask one more question?
Okay.
In Exhibit G, it has a column, this is a joint assessment, and so it's got a column for TIF and a column for SID, and there's a note below, so it actually caps the SID at 2 million, 2.1, and the TIF at 1.03. But then there's a note that says they could be reallocated between the two. Are the totals firm and it's just the expenses that can move, or can the totals shift?
So the totals can shift, but keep in mind that the TIF statute has a shorter list of qualified expenses than the CID statute does. So they're likely to run out of TIF eligible costs more quickly than they are to run out of CID eligible costs. So that split between the TIF and the CID was actually their estimate. It wasn't ours. We're pretty much indifferent to how that works out. We just know at the end of the day that that $3.2 million cap is the right fit for the total amount to generate the incentive that is required to generate a total rate of return.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
So I was just wondering, there's been a lot of discussion in one of my NIAs in that area. Can you tell us who some of the businesses that are going to go in, or is it too early to say?
I would love to, but I am sworn to secrecy.
Okay.
I know developers reps are here. Do we have signed contracts yet?
No, we do not.
Okay, okay.
On behalf of the applicant, but no, we're not at a point in time where we can.
Okay. I just know I keep getting calls, is this true, is this true? And so there's a little bit of buzz, so I just said I would ask, I told him I'd ask, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Emerson?
Well, Mayor, I was just going to say, for we subscribers of the Capital Journal, there was an article today about one of the businesses. What it said, whether it's true or not, is Chick-fil-A. So,
I told him I'd ask, Tony.
no problem.
The paper don't always get it right. I see Mr. Renters here, though.
He's going to get it right.
Councilman Duncan?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to reserve most of my comments for next week before we take a vote. I just want to make one comment because citizens will have a week to talk to us about this before we take that vote, and this will come as no surprise to anybody. Jeff didn't say anything wrong. He said all the right stuff and explained it very well. My problem with the CID always becomes the same thing. We call it an economic incentive that the city is giving a developer when that's not what it is. It is a sales tax increase that we are asking the citizens to pay an additional amount on to help pay for that development. That's different than the TIF, where we're willing to eat that cost, which we can then budget accordingly for. So I am struggling with that one, as I always do on these CIDs. It will weigh heavily on me as I lean towards this decision next week, but I want to continue to be very transparent about my big concern with the CID. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. I totally respect my colleagues' comments there. I will say the thing I like about the CID is it is an avoidable tax. You only pay it if you want to shop there or eat there. And I will tell you, that's one of the reasons I don't shop at a certain sporting goods store on the west side of Wanamaker, because I will go to the other side and pay Dick's a couple % less. But I totally agree. But in my opinion, as a business, if I'm willing to say, hey, I'm going to basically add 2% to my prices and put myself at a competitive disadvantage to other businesses, I'm fine with that. So but I totally understand where you're coming from, and the one thing I wish there was more disclosure of CIDs. Oftentimes you don't know, and matter of fact, that's how I found out about the one at the sporting goods store on 11%. What's this? But so I agree. That's the one thing I wish we had disclosure rules. If you go to Oklahoma, they'll have a little thing at almost every checkout that says this is a entertainment district or whatever, and there's an additional. There's some language they have in those signs that lets you know that you're getting ready to pay another 12-15%.
Councilman Camp?
I just think this is a great thing for that area. As Mr. White said, it's kind of been an area for the last 25, 30 years. It's kind of gone downhill. So it's nice to see an area, that, especially that parking lot, be used for something that's going to benefit most of Topeka. It's not going to have people have to cross the whole city just to go to certain places if we have multiple options of those places around town. So, and it looks like it's going to take care of a building that seems like we might have had some issues with with the previous owners of the building. So hopefully that will be taken care of also, and we can start growing the east side as much as we're growing the west side.
Councilman Bediviacula?
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. One, I really do like what Councilman Emerson said about how in the other city they give notice. State, in another state. So is that something that has to be regulated by the state then? It can't be regulated by local municipalities? Because if so, that would be a wonderful transparent mechanism to have for, our consumers, our citizens here in Topeka, but if that's not possible, then.
She's tapping right now.
Oh, she's tapping right now.
Making a note to look it up.
Okay, well, if you could get back with us on that, I'd appreciate it. I cannot believe I lost my other train. Oh, yeah. The CJ Online article, it had 2 restaurants that were unnamed, and just for clarity, was my understanding Chick-fil-A, yes, but that there was 2 other restaurants, or was that part of?
Chick-fil-A.
I thought at first it was, is anybody going to give anything on this?
The development agreement simply calls for 2 pad restaurants with 1 commercial space, and that is
Got
all
it.
that we can say at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess if we're contemplating a notice to people as they drive into a place of business, we might also itemize how much sales tax is going to the state, how much property tax is going to the county, how much property tax is going to the school district. Just full disclosure, right?
Everything will be a CVS receipt.
Exactly. I do agree that this is an avoidable tax, and frankly, right now, developers are having an extremely tough time. I mean, it's a double whammy. Money costs a whole lot more than it did 2 years ago, and building costs are through the roof. We think we're seeing 6-7% inflation. Anything to do with construction is 17-18% inflation. So just the fact that folks are willing to come to Topeka, and particularly Topeka Boulevard, make an investment in an area that desperately needs it, and really all they're asking is a little bit of incentive from wherever it comes from. Ultimately, it comes from the taxpayer, whether it goes through the city first or whether they're paying it directly, is not a lot to ask. So I will definitely be in support of this next week. Thank you.
Further comment? Questions for Mr. White or for Rhiannon? None? Thank you very much.
Now you need to open the public
okay.
hearing.
Point that out again. I got it on both sides. At this time, I would, we'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to the matter. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? And for the third time, is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Now, recognize the body members, governing bodies for any further comment if they would like to have before we move on. Okay? Thank you. Move on to agenda item 6B, if the clerk will read.
B is a public hearing for the purpose of considering adoption of a project plan in the area of Southwest 32nd Terrace and Southwest Topeka Boulevard in the South Topeka Redevelopment District.
Okay. So at this time, we'll have public comment. And I will ask, I want to make sure here this time, if there's anyone here who would like to speak. Is there a presentation on this one?
No, it was a joint presentation for both the CID
Okay.
district, which was the first public hearing, and the second, which is the TIF district
Okay, just want to make sure.
project plan.
Okay. At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak to the matter. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter? And for the third and final time, is there anyone present who would like to speak to the matter?
Mayor,
It-
are we afterward?
no.
Okay.
Seeing none, the public hearing is closed, and now I'll defer to any governing body members who would like to have a comment. Councilman Hiller.
Just had a question on the TIF, the $1 million, what the expectation was in terms of how many years that would be paid back, and what percentage of the increment that's likely to be.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so the TIF capture is only property tax, no sales tax.
Correct.
It's 100% of the TIFable levy, which is the total levy in 501 minus 29.5 mils. So minus 20 mil statewide school levy, minus it's not quite 8 mil 501 capital levy. I guess it's a little shy of 29.5. They're just shy of 8 mils. And the 1.5 mil state building levy. Those three levies under state law cannot be captured by TIF. The rest are captured. The development agreement permits that TIF to run 20 years, I don't expect that they'll need the full 20 years to get to their maximum term.
Okay, so to clarify, it will take 100% of the eligible increment
That's
up to
correct.
20 years, but you don't think it will take that long?
As soon as they hit their $3.2 million aggregate capture, the TIF and the CID will turn off.
But this would allow, then, this switch hitting would allow them to take $2 million and take more property tax than sales tax.
Well, again, I'll take you back to the statutory constraints that we've got
Okay.
on TIF. So on TIF, basically, you can pay for land acquisition, site prep, and then beyond that, it's really just public improvements. And so if you think about this site, you get acquisition, you get some site prep, you get to knock a building down and bring things up to pad level, you get to do the street improvements, but all the stuff on the private right-of-way is not TIF eligible once you start going vertical. So the pool of qualified expenses on the TIF side is less than it is on the CID side. So once they've certified all their costs, and we've captured what we can from the TIF, there's no reason for the TIF to stay outstanding anymore, if that makes sense. So we have a natural sort of limit on the TIF side. We have a contractual limit, and then we've got this statutory time limit, and then we've also got this statutory use limit that comes into play as well. And I think they're going to run out of costs fairly quickly on the TIF side. The CID statute is much broader. It allows all those TIF uses, but it also allows them to pay for ongoing operational costs and things like that, or to reimburse private vertical, excuse me.
Okay, we've had some trouble with our projects in the past, and so was trying to think best case scenario, which is what it sounds like we have. But if somehow that project didn't develop and it wasn't delivering the sales tax, then would we end up getting a deeper cut on property tax? That's where I was going with it.
I think the property tax is going to be what it is. So, but it's a little bit iterative, because if the project doesn't develop as promised, there won't be as much increment. So it'll obviously take longer to get to the cap. If they develop the project and they open a restaurant and it's fantastic for 3 years and it burns out like a shooting star and it becomes empty, I'm positive the owner will go to the county and ask them to reduce the valuation on that, which is going to reduce the increment, which again is going to slow the TIF capture over time. So we are assuming that the project will be constructed for what they say they can construct it for, and as Councilmember Dobler indicated, that's a pretty significant risk to them in this environment. We're assuming that they can construct it according to the schedule they told us they could, which could be a risk. We're assuming that they get the tenants when they say they're going to get them, and they're going to lease up quickly and start generating sales so they can generate CID and also generate that property tax increment, because a building that's full and operational is going to be valued more by the county for property tax purposes than an empty one. Meanwhile, both clocks are running. So the 20-year clock on TIF, the 22-year clock on CID are both clicking along. So if they develop more slowly, it really injures their ability to sort of get to that cap. But the cap remains. It's fixed regardless.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Hiller mentioned some past TIFs. I think one thing to keep in mind that this is different from TIFs that were done 20 years ago, where the city actually took the risk, sold bonds. These are, I believe, pay-as-you-go. So they do not produce income until that increment starts being produced. So really, in terms of risk to the city, there's very little. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
He did say pay as you go, and did you shake your head yes? Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Comments? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on now to action item 6C.
C is
Go ahead.
discussion and possible action on recent homelessness efforts, including camp cleanups and ordinance enforcement.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to make a motion to defer this item. I'm going to defer it to a date certain 1 month from now, or when staff is ready to discuss it again. So that gives us a little flexibility. Be open to a friendly amendment if somebody else has a better idea, but do think we ought to defer it. Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion to defer to 1 month from now. Okay, and a second by Councilman Emerson. Okay, we will, when we're ready, allow us to vote. Do we?
Okay. All right, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. Motion carried, action has been deferred. Move on to agenda item number 7, non-action items. If your clerk will read.
A is discussion regarding the evaluation of options by the city manager for the redevelopment of Hotel Topeka at City Center, located at 1717 Southwest Topeka Boulevard, Topeka, Kansas, subject to a development agreement approved by the governing body.
And I understand it, Jeff, that you're going to give us a presentation on this item?
I am, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jeff White with Columbia Capital again. So we are in the middle of an auction period, and so not going to discuss whether the city will or will not bid or what the amount of that bid would be, but did want to chat today about some questions that came up about if other cities own hotels and what are the modes under which they do that. So I'm going to talk about 4 scenarios or modes under which we see public involvement in hotels, almost always conference-related hotels, which I think is an important distinction. And then we've got 3 case studies, maybe it's 4 case studies, to talk about to help sort of operationalize how a real-life project might fit into that scenario grid that I'm talking about. So scenario 1 is a publicly owned, publicly operated scenario. So this is one where the city owns the hotel, maybe it acquired it, but it owns it, it renovates it at its cost, and it operates it with city staff. So this is not a model that we've found in the wild. It probably exists, but this really sort of looks like a convention center or something like that, if you want to think about other types of operations in the hospitality industry where the public does commonly own and operate that facility. So in this particular case, we'd expect that that facility, under Kansas law anyways, would likely be exempt from property taxation. Kansas law says that an operation that is a quote-unquote exclusive municipal use is eligible for a property tax exemption. That language is important as we go through the other scenarios. In this particular case, the city likely could use tax-exempt bonds to finance the acquisition and the renovation of the project. The city would be at risk of profit and loss. The city would control operations. It would be responsible for the operations and maintenance and it would also be responsible for major systems maintenance. So the HVAC system dies, it needs new windows, something like that. The city's on the hook. So that's scenario 1, which is all public. Scenario 2, which we found to be more common, is one where the city acquires, city owns, city pays to renovate, but it then contracts with a third-party private operator to manage that facility day to day. In that case, we believe under Kansas law, it would be subject to property tax. Depending on how that third-party contract was structured, if it was structured correctly, we could still probably use tax-exempt bonds. The city would be at risk for the profit and loss. It would have some control over operations indirectly through the management of the contractor that it engaged to do the operation of the hotel. The city would be responsible for operations and maintenance, and it would be responsible if that HVAC system died or if it needed new windows. So that's one step closer toward private operation. So instead of full public, we now have mostly public with a private operator subject to a contract. Scenario number 3 is one where the city might acquire it and own it, but it then turns the hotel over for renovation and operation to a third party, typically private operator. In that case, we think it would almost certainly be on the tax rolls for property taxes, unlikely to qualify for tax exempt financing. So in that particular case, that private operator is probably finding their own commercial financing to do quote unquote tenant improvements. The city probably would not be at risk for profit and loss. So this would be one where the city would be transferring that risk to a third party. As a result, it would mostly not have control over operations. So it would have control to the extent that it provided for that in the contract, but other than that, it would end up being pretty hands-off. City likely would not be responsible for ongoing operations and maintenance costs. So cleaning the place, maybe patching holes in the parking lot, those kinds of things. But we expect it probably would be responsible if the HVAC system blew up or if it needed windows. Then the last category is fully private. Third-party private operator acquires it, owns it, renovates it, operates it, certainly would be subject to property tax. Potentially, the acquisition could be tax exempt. And I'll talk about that in a second because that may sound counterintuitive. But the renovation costs and the ongoing costs certainly would not be eligible for tax exempt bonds. City would not have profit and loss risk. It would not have control over day-to-day operations. It would not be responsible for an O&M, and in this category, it probably would not have responsibility for that major systems maintenance. How could we finance the acquisition with tax exempt bonds if we can't finance the renovation with tax exempt bonds? We have the ability in Kansas to use constitutional home rule to do projects that are considered to be economic development. So the city can use tax exempt financing to borrow money to make an economic development grant. So that's exactly the structure, the fact pattern that would fit here. The city would borrow in the tax exempt market. It would then make a grant to a private operator to acquire the hotel and then maybe require the operator by contract to renovate it and operate it at that point. So fully public across the spectrum, less public to fully private at the other end. So those are the 4 categories. All right, so let's talk about our case studies, real live projects. Overland Park Sheraton, all right, drive on 435 in Overland Park. The Sheraton's attached to the Overland Park Convention Center. That land that the hotel sits on was owned by the city of Overland Park. They lease it to an instrumentality they created called the Overland Park Development Corporation. I'm just going to call that OPDC for short. OPDC issued tax-exempt bonds to construct the hotel. It then entered into a management contract with a third party to manage the hotel as a Sheraton. Interestingly, those bonds are, those bonds are secured only by the operations of the hotel. And because that is risky, bondholders wanted some additional security. The city pledged 100% of its transient guest tax collections on 6% of its levy. So when it entered into the hotel contract, it only had a 6% TGT. It's raised that since then, but that base 6% is pledged. I will tell you that the hotel regularly draws on the backstop. In fact, it regularly draws on the backstop to the point where Overland Park's rating agencies have taken notice, and about 18 months ago, Moody's Investor Service downgraded their AAA to a AA1 as the result of those continued draws on that transient guest tax, which I think is terrible rating agency policy, but we'll save that conversation for another day. So that structure I would put into scenario number 2. City owns it. City constructed it, and then it contracts with a third party It used tax-exempt bonds to do it. The Overland Park Sheraton is on the tax rolls for property tax purposes. It has a sizable property tax bill. The city is responsible for P&L risk, right? It's pledging its transient guest tax at the end of the day to do that. And then it's got operations for that, or control over operations of that facility through that contract. Indianapolis is right this very minute in the midst of a process to create a convention hotel. This is downtown Indy. In May, the Metropolitan Development Commission, which is like a joint bond issuance authority of the city and Marion County, where Indianapolis sits, approved a resolution authorizing the issuance of $625 million in tax-exempt bonds to finance construction of an 800-room convention center adjacent hotel downtown Indy. I believe that $625 million may include some convention center improvements as well, but it's a sizable transaction for a sizable hotel. According to, so based upon what we've read so far and what we know so far, we also think this fits into that scenario 2 bucket, just like the OP Convention Center. Interestingly, news reports indicate that the city tried to do a fully private hotel there. They granted exclusive development rights to a hotel developer. They offered incentives. The developer could not construct the hotel. It defaulted under its contract, and the city and the county stepped in to make sure that the hotel would be constructed. The reason driving that is they were losing conventions because they didn't have hotel space. Back closer to home, City of Wichita in 2001 purchased the 303-room Hyatt Regency, which is not adjacent to Century 2, but it is the flag hotel that supports the Century 2 Convention Center for $18 million in order to avoid the hotel losing its Hyatt flag. So Hyatt threatened, due to degradation in the quality of that facility, to pull its Hyatt name from the building. The city owned that hotel for a decade and a half. Under a scenario 2 structure, from what we can tell. Again, the city acquired it, it owned it, it issued tax-exempt bonds to renovate it, it contracted with a third party to operate that hotel, but it retained profit and loss responsibility. I had a conversation with a colleague that used to work for the city who indicated that they regularly use general funds to support the hotel operations over time. In 2016, they sold it back to a private operator for $20 million, so 15-year hold period, $2 million profit, not spectacular, at which point it became a scenario 4. So it went fully private starting in 2016. I don't have any updated information about how it's doing today. Of course, the private operator doesn't have to report that. Then our last close-to-home example is the Little Apple in Manhattan. Back in 2011, the city sponsored the creation of a development district that created a 135-room Hilton Garden Inn that also included a 30,000 square foot conference center as part of a larger TIF project. The development also included a 440-stall parking garage to support the hotel and the conference center. In 2020, the project was successful enough, the hotel expanded to 175 rooms, so it added 40 rooms, and 12,000 more square feet of conference space. According to reports that we could find about the project, the city owns the parking garage and the conference center, while a private company owns the hotel and operates it. And then that same private operator also operates the parking garage and the conference facility on behalf of the city. So in this case, we have a hotel that's a scenario 4, fully private, and then we've got a scenario 2, parking garage and conference center associated with that hotel as well. So that, I think, gives you a general sense of how the public can be involved in these things and how it is involved in these things, often associated with trying to keep conference facilities, convention facilities open and operational. I know there were some questions about payment of property taxes, competition with private markets. Again, I think unless the city is interested in owning and operating with its own staff a hotel, which I would imagine is probably not, I would expect that this hotel would be on the property tax rolls, which I think is important to a number of you. So that's the big picture of sort of what we see around the industries, just to get your juices flowing about how these different structures look. And with that, Mr. Mayor, happy to try to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, in your research, did you find a situation where, let's say, the county owned the conference center and the city owned the hotel, or some other combination of separate entities? Rhetorical question.
Certainly, we've got the situation in Indy where it appears that there's sort of joint involvement in that transaction. I'm trying to think. I didn't study this. I know in Denver the conference center is privately owned. I'm not sure what the ownership of the associated hotel. We could look hard enough and probably find that, but no, I didn't run across that.
Councilwoman Valdivia Arcola.
And I realize that was sort of a rhetorical question.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if this is the right time to ask the question, so this may be city attorney, and I don't even know if it's aimed towards Jeff, as it is a question. The whole point that Councilman Dobler brought up, which, okay, it was rhetorical, but number one, do we know if anybody in the county, from the county commission is here? Do we know if anybody is here? Do we know if there's any legal staff from the county here? Since I take it this is going to be I don't know, is it a partnership? Is that what this is? Okay. So then my other question, though, directly for the city attorney is, can I ask a question that is talking about the hotel, but not specifically what he's talking about right now? Is that vague?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so you tell me if this is an applicable question at this point. So I consider what happened with the meeting very rushed. I was very concerned. Obviously, the vote is out there that I did not vote for it. I think the issue with transparency as far as for public comment from the general public was very alarming, and that people didn't know what was coming down the pike. But specifically, I want to know why this isn't a city deal, a county deal, why we're dealing with this as a city rather than the county dealing with it, since they own the event center. And I understand that you can't get into the mind of anybody, but what happened? Because all of a sudden there was an emergency meeting, and where we're at right now. Can anybody, is that even, I'm just asking the question, man, because I've been having lots of questions from constituents, but residents from all over the city.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I'm going to answer this without answering because, again,
I don't want that.
We're in the auction period. I will say that in Kansas, cities, because of constitutional home rule, have a great deal more latitude to structure deals like this than counties do. Our range of tools is much broader. And could the county have gotten there? Probably. Is it easier for the city to do it? I think the answer to that question is yes. Counties are ultimately sort of
Do you work
creatures
for,
of...
okay, do you work for us or do you work for the county?
I work for you. I don't do work for the county.
I am asking for a little bit deeper than that, and I appreciate your
That's fair.
response. Okay, I don't want vagueness. I want to understand what happened in that. Honestly, I was on the way home from the emergency room that day, just trying to get to the appointment in time, kind of drugged out on Benadryl for an allergic reaction. And I'm trying to make it to the meeting, and I'm like, okay, it's all happening so quick. And if it wouldn't have been for Councilwoman Hofer's, because it didn't come into my mind quick enough to delay the third vote, but I want an understanding why we as the city are taking this up when this is really a county issue. So can anybody answer that question?
I don't think I can answer that. I don't know
Okay.
if the mayor,
Okay,
someone else
then,
can.
no, then it's fine if it can't be answered. I
I don't
get
think
it.
there's a direct, specific answer. I think in general, it's an opportunity, and we're working on that opportunity.
Then if that's all you can say, then that's my only question. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan?
No, that's what I was going to say. I think Mr. Rencher, that'd be a great question for him to ask when they open at 8 a.m. in the morning.
Any further questions for Jeff? Seeing none, thank you, Jeff, for
Thank you
the
all.
presentation. I appreciate having those scenarios presented for us. We do have, I'm looking here, some people signed up
Yes, got you.
for a comment on the Hotel City Center.
Yes.
We have 2 people signed up. Mr. Leo Hafner.
Thank you. Since there wasn't dissent allowed prior to the voting, I guess you'll hear it tonight. I feel like I'm in a time warp. Approximately a decade ago, we had a new city manager, and suddenly there was a push by the city council to purchase a private business, Heartland Park. Several of you were on the council at that time, and will remember that. We were warned of the great financial harm that would come to the city if the transaction didn't go through. Luckily, a group of level-headed citizens put a stop to that purchase, and guess what? The forecasted financial doom never occurred. Now, once again, we have a new city manager, and here we are with a push to buy another business, this time a hotel. We are again enduring the same tired predictions of financial doom for the city if we don't buy it. The lesson I took away from the Heartland Park episode is that most people in this city do not want you to spend their tax dollars bailing out private businesses. Apparently, some of you took away a different lesson from that. We can debate all day about whether rescuing distressed businesses is a legitimate government function. I believe it is not. Having said that, I would make the following points. Number 1, at least 3 professional hotel companies, experts in the field, have owned the property and have not been able to make a go of it. So what makes you think the city with no experience can turn that around? Number 2, the city will have the added cost of a management company, which previous owners didn't have, which will make it even more difficult. Number 3, there hasn't been sufficient time to conduct responsible due diligence on this project. You and I both know that a week or less is not sufficient time to assess, let alone accurately estimate what it will cost to remodel and renovate the place, and what about the unknowns like major mechanical systems that may need to be replaced. This is like jumping in a hole without knowing how deep it is and dragging the taxpayers down there with you. You know, there was a much better solution to this issue, which would have allowed everybody to win. Those of you who voted to buy the hotel, together with your 2 star witnesses from last Tuesday's meeting, could have formed an LLC, bought the things yourselves, remodeled it to your standards, run it how you want, and you didn't have to drag the taxpayers into it. But I guess you don't believe in it that strongly. The actions of last Tuesday threw 2 things down this rat hole. The first is a lot of taxpayer cash that could have been used for more pressing needs, such as replacing water infrastructure that needs to be replaced and the crumbling streets that are forever. Secondly, and probably more importantly, what you thrown away is the public trust that you will operate in an open and fair manner, considering all sides of an issue.
You still have a minute.
Okay. I came to that conclusion after reviewing the video of the meeting and records of the city's website. That meeting was conspicuously missing from the city's website, where all other meetings and agendas appear to be posted. Nobody from the general public seemed to know about this meeting ahead of time. Even members of the council seemed to question that, and the testimony from the 2 people who supported the purchase appeared to be totally orchestrated. I believe there was a mention of a limited announcement with no information about what was going to be discussed. So how did those 2 people know to come and talk? Clearly it was orchestrated before that. I don't mind losing a debate, but what I do mind is not being given the opportunity to debate the issue. The Kansas Open Meetings Act requires a informed electorate, and it's declared the policy of the state that meetings for the conduct of government affairs and the transaction of governmental business be open to the public. It's my surmise that this is a violation of that law, and I'm going to be following up with the Attorney General. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Pam Inslee.
Well, now that you've watched me walk up here with my walker, here's my first beef. We need more handicap slots out here by this end of the building rather than me walking all the way around on the Quincy side. But I digress. My name is Pam Inslee, and I reside at 2626 Southwest Arvonia Place, Topeka. Do you know, I'm going to back up what Leo said. I'm very disheartened to learn the City Council's intention to purchase the Hotel Topeka. What I find the most troubling is that the business of purchasing the hotel has been concealed from the general public until after the discussions have been held with Sean Dixon of Visit Topeka and Kurt Young of the Lodging Association on May 30th, 2023. And so obviously, financial people are in on this. I only became aware of the May 30 City Council meeting through a constituent in another district. That was a disservice to me and other constituents of Topeka. Prearranged public comments were limited to Mr. Dixon and Mr. Young. The timing of the meeting during the day and the lack of actual general public comments have only made me angry. The discussion of the May 30 meeting seemed to say, trust us as your city council members, we'll make sure this venture will work. You, the Topeka constituents, don't have to worry about financing. In actuality, the details about financing are few and far between for the people who need to understand it. So when does the city of Topeka need to be involved in owning a hotel? Have all options through city organizations such as Go Topeka, the Topeka Chamber of Commerce, JADO, more organizations within the City of Economic Development, have they been exhausted to find a reputable buyer or corporation with hotel experience that could purchase the building and run a full hotel to accommodate the Stormont Vale Event Center and other conference opportunities on the grounds? What about securing a private group of a Topeka business, men and women, to purchase the hotel? The current hotel has 225 rooms. What kinds of events are being discussed that would fill the hotel that would equate to the 50,000 guests per Mr. Dixon in a year? Convention centers in larger cities are surrounded by restaurants and shopping opportunities. The Stormont Vale Event Center does not have such other amenities unless you're looking to the Quick Shop across the street on Topeka Boulevard. The general public does not really understand your discussion because the idea of buying this hotel was sprung on constituents a week ago, and that's the rub. The May 30th meeting did not appear that well organized, and parliamentary procedure at different times. The city attorney had to be called on too many times to maintain the procedure. I understand the nature of executive sessions. I'm a retired school teacher. I've spoken in this council on the behalf of Topeka Jump. I understand executive sessions. But still, there should have been more discussion on the part of all council members explaining the city's process in acquiring the hotel. As I listened to the May 30th meeting, I was left in the dark about details not included in the basically closed meeting. The actions and comments that have occurred this past week smack of doing business behind the curtain. I believe these actions may have cost the council public support. And I don't know if you've received comments from more of your constituents, but I can tell you the hotel topic is out and about the city. And there are many more Topekans who have questions about this hotel deal. It's all about transparency to your constituents and who will be footing the bill should this deal go sideways. So thank you for your opportunity to speak. I applaud Leo Hafner for getting up in a much more eloquent way of sharing my same thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And I appreciate the opportunity to have spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard discussion, public comment. Move on to agenda item 7B, if the clerk will read.
B is discussion of the proposed 2024 to 2023 CIP and the 2024 to 2026 CIB.
Mr. Margin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. members of the council. I would like to start by thanking you all for your hard work, for your dedication, and for your patience throughout these 2024 City of Topeka Capital Improvement Plan process. We feel confident that this plan will continue to address the short-term and long-term capital improvement needs of the residents of the City of Topeka. And the Finance Department feels confident that we identify an optimal way to fund for the short-term and long-term needs of the capital improvement plans. At this time, I don't have any additional information to share with you, but I would like the opportunity to allow the finance budget manager to discuss an item that was brought to my attention regarding auditing older projects.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, governing body. First, I did want to identify that we did meet the 6-slide minimum this evening. So we're, maximum, right. Thanks. So at the beginning of the discussion, it was brought up kind of, are we continuing to audit projects that are currently open? And so we wanted to update that that's something that we constantly do. And over the last month, we have reviewed all projects that are 3 years or older and have identified kind of what the open purchase orders are and the status of those to get those finished and closed. And then any that didn't have any open purchase orders, we are actively working on closing those projects. So just wanted to provide that update, that we have done that analysis and that audit and are continuing to do our best to complete projects at their scheduled time. So that's all. If we'll stand for any questions or concerns on the CIP before next week's vote.
Councilman Duncan.
So just so we're all, or so I understand, the document we were sent today, if we took a vote right now, that's it, right? The one we got is the current final document that we received today. Okay.
Right. After all the revisions that we have done through the whole process.
Barring us making amendments and all
Yes,
that.
sir.
Okay. Well, the revision I don't see is we talked about Huntoon. And there was a discussion that we would get some alternative suggestions on what could happen to Huntoon. To date, unless I missed it, which totally could happen, I have not seen any alternative suggestions, and the current plan still has it as originally outlined, I guess. So I take to assume unless we make a change, that's kind of where it stands at this point. I guess that's the question. Are we going to get anything, or is what is in there is what is in there as it relates to Huntoon?
So my recommendation would be to allow me to start the public engagement and to allow me to get a consultant on board to come up with some legitimate cost estimates and options. So sorry, thank you, Freddie. Let me start over because the microphone was not engaged. My recommendation would be to give me an opportunity to start the public engagement, to get a consultant on board and have that consultant put together some different cost proposals as to whether it's just going to be a straight mill and overlay, or if it needs to be addition of shared use path, ADA compliance at the intersections, replace badly failed curb and gutter, versus a full depth reconstruction. So I think that I would need to have an opportunity to get legitimate engineering to be able to bring cost estimates to you, as opposed to just saying, how much do you want to cut? And give me an arbitrary amount.
Okay. Okay. No, that helps, because what I might do is talk with legal and you and whoever else about how we can maybe make an adjustment to that CIP that gives you that authority without us sort of letting the whole project. I don't know what that means. We'll talk about it, but
right.
Okay.
But I'll point out that the project budget sheet does have spaced out over a multiple year period of time the approval. So phase one would just be for that public engagement. Phase two would be to do design. Phase three would then be utility relocation, right-of-way acquisition, and then 4, 5, and 6 are the 3 years of construction. So it's not like a $22 million is being approved right off the bat.
Gotcha. No, I understand that. So, okay, thank you very much.
Councilman Kell?
I know I've maybe beaten a dead horse here, 'cause I brought it up several times. I continually get emails about Elevation Parkway and how the city, citizens are against Elevation Parkway. And I think it's maybe something we need to take a little harder look at and look to see maybe allocating these funds elsewhere to improve some of the aspects, because I have not gotten one single positive for Elevation Parkway. I've gotten several against Elevation Parkway as a whole. So I think that's something we, as a project, we might need to look a little bit more into to make a decision whether we're going to keep that as part of the project, part of the CIP or not.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Vaughn, first of all, thank you for all your work on this, and Freddie as well. I guess my gripe is always when we get the new revised stuff, it's hard to know. It's almost like a what do you call it? Not a treasure hunt, whatever the reverse for treasure hunt is. It's hard to know what got changed. And is there any way you could give us a document that just summarizes the changes from now to, from the original to what it is now, please?
Yeah, we'll go back and we'll create that document for is something mentioned elsewhere, but so we'll get that ready before the vote next week.
Okay, that and preferably if we get a few days ahead of the vote, it'd be great,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know, it does kind of feel like beating a dead horse with the Elevation Parkway. I have not looked within my district and outside of my district for any kind of engagement with this particular project that we're looking at that I think says now it's about 18 million. Is that right? 18. I don't have the book right here with me. It has come to me, and I have not heard one affirming thing. And I think that we're at the point where none of these decisions are easy at all. And we received a very lengthy email, I think it was today, from someone that had it figured out how the creation of Elevation Parkway would be helping people more in the county than it would in the city. And I have to go over that again because he had some really impressive looking calculations. But I think that it's at the point where I am concerned that we are going to continue to lose trust of folks, even though I know that we all work hard to do the best we can. They don't understand that the realm that we're in and how this can be a very difficult realm. By the same token, there are so many concerns about the way that money is or is not being spent. And I've been hearing more, which is troubling, and it's not just specific to Elevation Parkway, it's specific in general to when I tell people you have to vote, you have to have your voices heard. Whether you agree with me or not, this is not the issue. You have to come up and be vocal. Local government is that last bastion of like real democracy taking place, right? Where the people's voices can be heard. And I think that what's happening is that there are a number of people, not just within my district, in districts all over, that don't feel like their voice is mattering when they come up and have deep concerns or do emails about big spending items. And I know that there are a lot of people that are more knowledgeable than me. I know that there are a lot of people more knowledgeable than, average folks out there. But that still doesn't mean that there is some validity, and ultimately, this is the taxpayer money being spent. So I'm very concerned, about the Elevation Parkway. Many of it, in my district, another district, kind of look at it as an elitist kind of thing, and we shouldn't be looking at it that way, but that's the way it's coming over to me in commentary. So I just wanted to say in many ways, Councilman Kell, I agree with you, but that's all I wanted to say about that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Duncan, I would be happy to go ahead and look at that Huntoon plan with you, because we might be coming at it from different angles, but I'm also very interested to hear what we get from public engagement on that project, because obviously the citizens of District 1 and District 6 have been living with the 12th Street project, and there's been a lot of opinions and some very strong held opinions for a very long period of time. And so I want to make sure that as we're going ahead and continuing to improve our streets, improve our thoroughfares, and making them more equitable for people on the road and people on the sidewalk, that we're being prudent with the dollars that we spend, but we're moving forward, that we have an eye to the future, that we're not doing this again anytime soon, hopefully, and that we're also taking into consideration how we can be greener, how we can be more equitable, how we can be safer. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further comment? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. A follow-up on Councilwoman Nager here real quickly. Just for the record, for everyone who wasn't around at the time, there are some misinformation going around and has been about the 12th Street project. Literally hundreds of people were involved in a whole series of public meetings and public input sessions about 12th Street, and most were very favorable. And so for what that's worth, just to kind of balance some of the narrative that's been going around, there really was a lot of process. I wanted to share with everyone a piece that whoops, two of those. I've been looking, as I think you all know, much more big picture, or trying to focus on big picture of the CIP, saving tax dollars, adjusting our systems back to the way they've been in the past to save substantial amounts of money. And that was what I was going to meet with you about too, by the way. And so the piece that's coming around, I think nothing's changed for me. I've visited with a couple people who may have some comments about this too, but given the surplus that we had at the end of the year last year, and that city manager has been discussing, anticipating for this year, I think it's time for us to move some of the expenses that never were eligible for bonding or for the half-cent sales tax back into the general fund. The list that you have in front of you is for $7 million. Those are four different, very identifiable line items in our budget. One is the firm budget, where we're doing maintenance on buildings, overdue maintenance on structures. When you've seen the big spreadsheet, a lot of them are like $1,000 or $4,000 or whatever. They're all often small items that have been added up to make themselves eligible for bonding. And again, that is a maintenance item. It was put in at first at $2 million for a few years, and now it's showing up as $2 million a year forever. So suggesting that we get firm back out. Traffic signals are simply an example from what has been bonded recently. When you see it, it's $1 million every single year. We do another intersection worth of traffic signals. So when it's something that we do every year, that we repeat every year, if we bond it, we're just netting, paying substantially more annually than we need to for the same thing that we're just going to buy again. The same is true for fire apparatus. Back in around 2010, we were really in bad shape with both police cars and fire engines. So we started with police cars and said, all right, we're going to do a lease purchase thing for a couple of years, and then we're going to get them back into the cash budget, and we did. Fire engines are more expensive, so it was a little bit bigger hurdle. But if you look, we're putting about $2 million a year for fire apparatus in that budget. Again, it's every single year. And so getting that out of the bonding budget and back into cash just makes solid fiscal sense and operational sense to me, and I just wanted to put them on paper for you. The last item in the $7 million is the $2 million a year that's going to prevention, that's coming out of half-cent sales tax. We know we've been behind on half-cent sales tax. We know that costs have gone up substantially. So if we don't relieve something out of that half-cent sales tax budget, we're not even going to get the projects done that we have done. And so Those also are maintenance. They're not major street repair and rebuilds, which is what that was intended for. So the suggestion there, and people could approve all of them or whichever ones you're most comfortable with, but it appears that we have that capacity, and we need to tell the staff that in advance of starting the operating budget so that they know that and can plan around that. A little bit of detail below, you got the supplement 3 where the staff ran some numbers on what it's costing us to borrow today. Interest rates have gone up some and they're going to continue to rise, but the staff is borrowing at 20 years instead of 15, which we had thought was how many, was what our maximum was. But if you look, in these compare to these items above, if you're borrowing $1 million for 20 years, it is costing us $1,602,000. It's costing us 60% more than the cost of those traffic signals because we're borrowing instead of paying cash. That $600,000 each year could go to cash, to the operating budget, to buying other things that we need, or, if we don't really need it, reducing taxes. For $2 million at 20 years, that's $1.2 million a year, or for each project, however you want to look at it. Because once you do it every year, it's that much every year that you're spending more than you would have had to if it was cash. I put a couple things. There was some reference to the City of Topeka Resolution 8818. This is a council-adopted debt policy, and it says we shall employ the use of debt to complement but not supplant recurring commitments on annual expenses. And it also says we would not fund the cost of current operations or routine maintenance with long-term debt financing. So I think I made the pitches on both of them. I wanted to hand that out today because I think it's a quick reference, and encourage you to think about making those bigger moves so that we can, that will also mean that, staff hasn't talked about it a lot, but there was some discussion of needing to raise our debt limit. We wouldn't need to do that if we make these transfers. And also, frankly, and I share the sentiments about Elevation Parkway, but bonding was really intended to do big projects like build a city hall, have a one-time expense that you might spread over time, because to spend it all in 1 year out of nowhere is so burdensome. Wasn't meant for these annual kinds of things. It'll help the relief on all the considerations and how huge this notebook is as well. Open for questions or discussion, but thank you for letting me present.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Hiller, I appreciate you passing this out, and those numbers are kind of sobering when you see them, and I too agree that if you have something you're doing on a regular basis, it's not a capital expense, right? I mean, it's something you're doing every year, so I guess my request for finance staff, and if you provided this to them by any chance?
I have some extra
could you?
copies. I'll run them down.
I guess I would just ask what level of this could we fund with cash? Because over time, so if you can do this for a few years, eventually, it'll pay for itself eventually.
Absolutely.
It might be hard for a few years, but I wonder what our current, excess funds each year are, if this could be absorbed in the budget or not.
Yeah, I can respond to that. So this year for the 2024 budget, we're preliminarily currently developing that. With how our projections are looking currently, it is our goal to move what we can that is GO funded, that these projects that are yearly maintenance programs, to be cash funded. But at this moment, we do not know. We don't have our county property tax estimates yet, and so it's still very preliminary. What we do have is we pulled the past 3 years of our end-of-year surplus, and in 2020, we spent $1.5 million on geo avoidance. In 2021, it was 1.4. And this last year, 22, with the inclusion of the design fee fund, we
used $4.5 million of surplus for geo avoidance. So it is something that is a high priority that we are looking to do and trying to do. But at this point, we don't know for sure. So that's why they would still be in the CIP book as geo bonds, because we frankly don't know, and we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're not able to do those maintenance projects if there isn't room in the operating budget. But it is something we are trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Hill, I also appreciate putting this together. I don't agree with all of your line items. I think half-cent sales tax was put in place to relieve, to some extent, our inability to fund street maintenance from the general fund and motor fuels tax. I don't see motor fuels tax going up anytime soon as we drive less and switch to electric vehicles. So I think that's one I could not support. Certainly the first two, I think, are maybe a good first step into trying to shift. I have issues with the firm. I think we are. If you look at our debt service policy, it has a minimum project size, as I read it, of $125,000, and I think we're taking a lot of small projects, lumping them together, and selling bonds, and that just doesn't feel quite right. So I could certainly support moving the firm into the operating budget. Traffic signals, I think that's another one that we should take a look at, because we replace traffic signals every year. They do have a lifespan that meet the debt service policy, certainly, but I think we could take a look at that and see if we can use some of our excess funds to fund traffic signals. So I think those first two really hit home for me. Thank you.
Is there a comment? Questions for Betty or Adam? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move next to agenda item number 8, which is public comment. We have 4 people signed up. Mr. William Brandlin.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, you all received a handout. It's a map of the area in question that's involved in PUD 2302. And I'd like to talk about, first of all, a traffic study that you guys suggested, I think 2 weeks ago. I don't know if they're going to do it or not, but I'd just like to reiterate that the traffic study, the contractor chosen to do that should not be chosen by the Planning Commission or the developer. They have a vested interest in it. And I would ask you to do whatever you can to make that happen. Okay, and then if there's no traffic study done by the Planning Commission, I'd recommend that you reject PUD 2302, since the Planning Commission did not exercise reasonable due diligence to address the legitimate concerns of the governing body, as well as all of the neighboring, neighborhood residents. We're here and we're getting beat up, and they're not even spending the time to do an adequate study. And then the last thing is, if you'll refer to your map now, and this has to do with the extension of Sproaton Lane, and on the map it's the hash marked area down here. Walnut, Sproaton, and Sanford lanes are way too narrow to accommodate any traffic at all. Okay, we measured it with a laser, and you can see that it goes from 21 feet 2 inches going from west to east to 20.9 inches to 19.4 at the curve. and at the curve, there's 3 driveways, and then when you get on Sproaton, it's 19 feet wide. Well, if you own a Subaru Forester like I do, you can park 2 of those on each side of the streets, legally parked, and all of a sudden, whatever street that is becomes a 1-lane street. 1 lane each way. And if you add new people, because of the development, 30 units, 2 cars per unit, 60 cars in the unit, and you do the math, that's 44,000 entries and exits per year. How's it going to accommodate it? I'm sure the city isn't going to widen the streets. So I would just ask you to remember that when the Planning Commission comes back and says there is no need for a traffic study. The Planning Commission would have come in the neighborhood and talked to the neighbors. We could have told them the problems we have with the traffic as it is. Well, it's just going to get worse. So I'd just like you to keep that in mind. And Mayor, I remembered what you told me the last 2 times. There will be no questions. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Chris Deester, or is it Deister, sir?
Thank you. First of all, before my 4 minutes starts, greetings, Mayor and the members of the board, of the council. I was just wondering why, I'm not very familiar with this, but all of a sudden we tabled my first address that I wanted to make as suggested by one of the council members. I just was wondering why that happens. Because, you know, I came down here fully expecting and preparing to talk about this important issue. And just as a matter of course, would like to know why that was tabled.
Well, Deputy Mayor made the motion, and I believe it was done so that we could be better prepared for that presentation.
Okay. All right. That's it. That's good enough for me. I did have another item because a friend of ours was attacked recently by a pit bull, and wonder if this is a tired topic for this council. Because this breed needs to be outlawed, period. That comes, you know, kind of hard to people who love pit bulls. But, you know, there's a lot of things we like that are a hazard of the nature of the beast. And it's apparent to all of us that this is a breed that needs to be absolutely controlled. But may I compare it to nuclear power plants? They're very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. It's one of the reasons why constantly in Congress we go back and forth every decade, thinking, well, they're going to disband this, they're going to open them back up again. But it's useful for the general population, as directed by Congress, to keep those things alive because the relative profit to the community as a whole is worth the risk of having these. But the worth of having one breed have the freedom it has by loving dog owners to occasionally maul people is absolutely untenable, unacceptable, and it must not happen any longer in this town. It must not happen any longer in this town. And this has to be faced, and we're always kicking the can down the road. Because we don't want to make people unhappy. We want to consider their happiness. And this is going on so much in America now in so many ways, and we don't need to go into them, but they're all apparent, that people pay when laws either aren't made or aren't followed or ignored by district attorneys, by this and that and the other thing. terrible things happen to real taxpayers and individuals. Please. I know this lady. She was attacked about a week ago, I think it was. And she sustains, may I have a minute more?
You have a minute.
She sustains minor injuries. Isn't that nice? She could have been killed. But a neighbor came to her rescue, held the dog, risked his well-being, held the dog until proper authorities came to to take care of the dog. But what I want to report is that several of the people, what was reported was that, well, a policeman was asked, what do you do with these dogs? And he said, well, we usually take them out to the country and release them. And I thought, well, if that rumor is true, then we're doing something wrong. Because every bite by a pit bull needs the euthanasia. And first of all, most primarily, the breed needs to be outlawed in the city limits for sure. And I personally won't rest until that happens. But we
Your
need to
time
have
is
the
up
guts
now,
to do
sir.
what's necessary.
Your time is up now, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
You want any more time?
Well, no.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Steve Schiffelbein?
Good evening. My name is Stephen Schiffelbein, and I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Committee of Topeka Justice Unity Ministry Project. On May 1 of this year, we celebrated the Affordable Housing Trust Fund reaching the milestone of $1 million following this governing body's vote on April 11th. We are excited to see this governing body finally bring the Affordable Housing Trust Fund up to $1 million so that it can become active and create more desperately needed affordable housing in Topeka neighborhoods. Unfortunately, to the best of our knowledge, the fund has not been activated for use yet. So, we are here today to implore you all to move forward with the next step in utilizing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The next step, to call together the Affordable Housing Review Committee so they can begin issuing requests for proposals to housing developers. We know that Topeka cannot afford to let this resource sit unused. As the cost of living continues to increase and we continue to see more and more people experiencing homelessness in our community. Affordable housing may not be the only factor contributing to the increasingly high number of those that are unsheltered in Topeka, but it is undoubtedly a large piece of the puzzle. JUMP has a seat on the Affordable Housing Review Committee, and we are excited to get the process started. JUMP members will be present at every city council meeting, sharing reminders about the importance of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund every week until this review committee is activated. When that step happens, it will be another opportunity for the city to show its residents that affordable housing is indeed a top priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lazone Grays.
Nice new podium you got here. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I shared information with you in advance. Hopefully you got it, had a chance to review it, because it's a lot of information, but there's no action that you have to do immediately. But it's really about, I was going to come a few weeks ago, but then the work requirements for those receiving food assistance was going to become a topic of the national level. And now that that is done, and we know where that's at, Kansas had already passed, it went into effect last year for those who were 18 to 49, able-bodied, no dependents, who were seeking food assistance, that they have mandatory work requirements. Working, participating in an approved job training program, or some other type of program for them to keep receiving the food assistance. That went into effect for 18 to 49 last July. This July is going to be changed to those who are 50 to 59. Able-bodied, no dependents, but there are particular work requirements. And now that it's going to be federal policy from 18 to 54, I believe, able-bodied, no dependents, mandatory work requirements. Working in approved job training programs or in some other type of secondary activities. Now, I had shared within the packet of information that, state law and federal law doesn't give cities and counties the latitude to do nothing. There has to be some type of response or adaptation to what these policies are going to be. When the welfare reform law in 1996, I shared within the documents there, then Mayor Joan Wagnon, she put together a welfare to work coalition, because there are organizations who are going to have to be prepared in dealing with the numbers. What I had provided in there as well is I went to the DCF and got the caseloads for food assistance, families, individuals, and I can't remember what the others are. So it was Shawnee County, and it's hard to get it broke down to Topeka. But there are tens of thousands, in Shawnee County. It doesn't say how many are in Topeka, but there are probably going to be some people here in Topeka who are going to fall within these. So then it goes on to, I look to the work requirements as far as looking for work. That's the easy part. The job training programs that will fit, what are those going to be? And what are those secondary, other options that are available? They did take veterans, those who age out of foster care under a certain age, and the homeless off of the list where they have to have the work requirements. So in a rinse and repeat sort of manner, the same thing that Mayor Wagnon did back then of bringing relevant organizational stakeholders, those who may be helping people get work, those who may have specific job training programs, or some of the other opportunities, which was work experience, workplace experience, and even volunteerism with nonprofits in different agencies. So I would think that our city, because this is something that our city has to make its own plan, would compile stakeholders, discuss it, see what it is that we would have to do, so that we have some type of a network within our own, so that we can meet that need of our citizens.
You need a few minutes?
Yes, sir, that would be
How many do you need?
a couple of minutes is fine.
Couple minutes. Move, second by Councilwoman Nager. Those all in favor say aye. Aye. Proceed.
Thank you. So I would really suggest, under the office of the mayor and city manager, that maybe you would convene stakeholders just like in the past, so that we could have someone, there are questions that I have, and I know a lot about this stuff, that someone from the policy of DCF could really come and speak to, so people could ask questions. Therefore, not paraphrasing what I'm saying, but getting the facts on what is that, 20 or 30 hours per week? What are those secondary options that are available in lieu of not working and not being in a job training program? Who are those providers going to be, or who will they already have? And is there some organization that already have some training programs that would be eligible? I think after having DCF policy folks answer questions, then the city and the community would have a better maybe look and see what it is that we can do, and maybe there's nothing that needs to be done whatsoever. So didn't want to inundate you with a lot of information, and I tried to add in the handouts that I had emailed in advance more information that you can look into on your own to see if this is something that would merit your concern or consideration. Our organization, thanks to the city's ARPA funding, are sort of ahead of the curve, because that's exactly what our Neighborhood Resource Center is to do, is to provide a place and a space where people can come and get the type of job training and the type of access to assistance to do those resumes and get those jobs. If there is 2 jobs for every person looking, we have our work cut out for us. If millions are coming from infrastructure to do a lot of work and we can't find people, we got our work cut out for us. So that's my request, that you take this consideration and possibly bring together groups and make a plan. Although doing nothing is actually an option. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, no one else has signed up to speak. Madam Clerk, you have announcements?
For the May 13th agenda, we will have one proclamation. We'll have 2 board appointments. We'll have a presentation from the Shawnee County Appraiser, an update. Consent agenda, we will have an expenditure ordinance, and then we will have a special event, a noise exemption for the Pennett's 5-year anniversary. Action items include an ordinance for Sherwood Office Park, a zoning change at 29th Street and Southwest Villa West Drive, and then we'll have a historic landmark overlay at 400 Southwest Washburn Avenue, and then we will have an ordinance establishing the CID and the South Topeka TIF, and then a resolution approving the CIP, and then the corresponding revenue bonds resolution.
Thank you. Just checking again. Are there any council members who have any announcements to make? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to say, I wanted to bring this forward. We had, the Green family has been a huge pillar in East Topeka. Tommy Green has been a lifelong resident, very active in the CAC, also in the NIAs, just very active all over, very positive man, when he passed away. He had a big heart and he loved everybody, and he passed away because his heart gave out. I think that's kind of ironic, but I visited with his daughter, and she said that near or far people are contacting her, so they're getting through. Tommy's wake will be June the 9th from 5 to 8 at Peaceful Rest Funeral Home, 401 Southwest Harrison, and his funeral service will be Saturday at True Vine Missionary Baptist Church, 307 Southeast Teffa. And I just wanted to announce that and send my condolences to his family, and keep his family and especially his children in prayer. Also, I just wanted to announce there's a lot of Juneteenth events going on, and I would encourage my colleagues to go and check those out. There's food, fun, and family, and I know that they're going to have a parade. I forget the date, but there's a lot going on in June. And then also, July is Fiesta time, so we'll be gearing up on this corner over here for Fiesta time. Not that corner, but for this corner. But so I just wanted to say that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilwoman Buddy Bianca.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'd be remiss if I didn't. I just want to wish my granddaughter, Kennedy Marie Lehman, a happy 12th birthday tomorrow. Love you, sweetheart. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm checking with the city attorney. At this point, we do not need another second executive session. I would like to make a motion at this time I move the governing body waive the rules to add several items to the agenda for immediate action. I've made my motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion by the governing body? Okay, we take our vote.
All right. Okay. Okay, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. That motion being carried, I'd like to make a second motion. I move the governing body accept City Manager Stephen Wade's request for a leave of absence effective immediately. Entertain a second. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion by governing body? Okay, we'll cast our vote.
All right. And Mayor? We have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. My third motion, I move introduction and passage of a resolution introduced by Deputy Mayor Neil Dobler naming Richard Neinstedt as acting city manager. I have a second by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion by the governing body? Seeing none, we'll cast our vote. Okay.
Does that mean effective
yes.
immediately?
It's
that
okay, you can go.
Okay.
Yes, I believe the motion is effective immediately. Upon passage of the resolution, it would take immediate effect.
Thank you for asking.
Okay, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. My next motion is to authorize the mayor, me, to negotiate and execute an employment agreement with Richard Neinstedt for acting city manager. A motion and seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion by the governing body? Seeing none, we'll cast our vote.
All right, we have 10 yes, the motion carries.
Motion's been carried. I want to make sure that I don't leave anything out. And we've already gone through our public comment. No second executive session. If there's no further business before this body, I adjourn this meeting.